This question has a table of rankings for teams which are qualified for an imaginary World Cup tournament. So it says the rankings were decided according to the team's success over the last 4 years, with number 1 being the highest rank, etc. So what we are being asked to do is for each group, Group A, Group B, Group C and Group D, to complete the table of data. So you're going to work out the mean for each group, the median for each group and the range for each group. So to work out the mean for each group, you're just going to add those 4 numbers in the column. So for example, group A, we're going to add 65, 63 and 30 and 17 and divide by 4. So for group A, I've just done some workings down the right. So the mean for group A is what I just said. You get 175 over 4. You've been asked to give your answers to 1 decimal place. So you should end up an answer of 43.8, and then you would just note that down in your table and then calculate the mean for group B in exactly the same way. So I'm just going to populate the table for the mean. Okay, so your table is going to end up looking like that when you've calculated the mean for everything there. So for the median, remember we write our list of data in order of smallest to biggest. So for group A, our smallest value is 17, our next biggest value is 30, then we've got 63, and then we've got 65. So the only tricky bit here is remembering that when you cross off pairs of numbers, what you're essentially going to do is add the 2 middle numbers, and then you're going to divide them by 2, because remember when we've got even numbers left in the middle, we add them together and we divide them by 2. And when we do that, what we end up with is 46.5 as our median. Now you're going to follow that exact process for all the other groups because they all have an even number of values. So write your list in order of smallest to biggest. It's only 4 numbers, should be quite quick. Add the 2 middle numbers and divide them by 2 to get your median. And once you've done that, you end up with your table looking like this. Okay, and finally we want to find the range. So because we've already written our list in order of smallest to biggest, we can see what our biggest value and our smallest is. And all we're going to do is take away our smallest from our biggest. So our range in group A is going to be 65 and we're going to take away 17. Okay, and we end up with 48, and I've just filled in the rest of the table there as well, following exactly the same process for the range. Okay, so all we have now is a table of data, and we can compare those numbers. So the next part of the question is asking you to comment on the results, a bit like you would in a science experiment. Now these questions are a lot harder, so thinking back to our lesson on pros and cons of different types of average, don't worry if you didn't get this, but I would like you to at least be thinking about it. So the mean or median in this case, we've got quite a limited set of data. We only actually have 4 pieces of data per category. So what we would say is we would use the mean because it takes into account all of the data, as opposed to the median, which only really uses those 2 middle pieces to find an average. So because the data set is small, use the mean. Okay, so key phrases really reference to which type of average, the mean, and uses all data would be fine for this question. Okay, so part C is asking which group has the largest spread of data, and explain why the group's data is so spread out. So when we're talking about spread, we're talking about the range, okay? So the range, remember in our lesson previously, we were talking about how consistent groups of data were. So the number that has the largest spread of data is this category here. We're looking for the largest number, which is group A. Now this is a bit tricky because it's sort of testing your football knowledge and it requires you to look back at the teams in the different groups. So if we look at group A compared to the others, we could say something along the lines of it's got 1 mid-ranking team, but most of them are very low-ranking teams, which is going to drag that not only average down, but it's going to mean that the team is less consistent because there's more disparity between the team that's the best and the team that's the worst. Okay, so your sentence might look something like that. Ignore the bit in square brackets. Group A, there is a wider gap between the best and worst teams, mid-rank and low rank. So that's going to affect the spread of rankings in that set of data. Finally, most questions ask for averages based on the mode. Why might this not have been included in the question? Essentially, they're all different ranks. There is no mode in any of the teams, so there is no point using that as an average. It would be completely useless. So you could say the mode in this case is not very useful for ranked teams.